I was having a conversation last night. I was talking with a colleague at ESPN, and he said, Chael, what do you make of the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight? And he said, I watched it and I don't buy it. He said, what do you think? I said, well, my eyes, it looked as though we had two guys that were cooperating, not two guys that were competing. I'm going to stop the thought right there because that's a very loose, very touching of the subject way of me saying I don't think it was a straight fight. I think it was wrestling. But I don't want to go that far because I don't know that it was that far. It looked as though two guys cooperated more than they were competing. That's not the same as a work. A work is a vernacular to the professional wrestling term where it is agreed upon ahead of time what is going to happen. There was even some dialogue in the Floyd fight that Floyd knocked Logan out, caught him, and held him up. And there's a video that's going around that you guys might have seen. If you watch the video, like you could see where that conspiracy would come from. Floyd for sure did hit him. Logan for sure came in. I apologize, Jake. Logan came in. Floyd got him in an underhook and held him up. Is what it looked like on a really quick video. I mean, you could make the case at least. Or somebody saying that's what they saw. Look, that's a tough sell any way you want to do it. Because what you're arguing is that Floyd held him up to continue the contest as a way of entertaining us fans. So that would do away with the belief that the most exciting thing is the finish. You would have Floyd arguing as a way of entertaining the fans, I made you watch what I made you watch for 8 painfully boring rounds instead of knocking the guy out, which would have made everybody happy and make the story go away. I mean, just in face value, it's a very tough sell. When those guys did get close and they did hit, I believe they were looking to do damage. That's why I'm not calling it a work. I just thought that we had a level of cooperation. And so the colleague asked me, I thought the same thing. I did not think that was a straight adjudication. That's just one guy's idea. And he said, I've heard you talk about me. He said, I've heard you talk about the fixed fights that they used to do over in Pride. He goes, well, how did they do that? Well, this is an old story, but I'll remind you guys of it because he was greatly entertained when I told him the way they would fix fights in Japan, they would only go to one guy. First off, that's why you will hear fighters that won fights in Japan that did not win those fights. You will hear fighters that won fights in Japan argue to this day, that's not true. This never happened. Well, they're telling the truth as far as they know it. So in professional wrestling, both guys come into one room, you look left, right, you work out the match, you work out what's called the finish, you exit. Eventually later that night, they come through the curtain, perform it for the world. In Pride, they would only visit one locker room. Here's what we want you to do. And they would never say to this never happened in front of me, we want you to go down or we want you to lose. They would come in and say, pretend you had a wrestler, okay? And they come into the room and they tell the wrestler, we will give you $10,000 to not wrestle. No clinches and no takedowns. That is going to up greatly the percentage and the outcome of this contest. That's how they would fix fights in Pride. That I know for sure. They may have done other things. Chael's experience, this is the way they would do it. If that guy agreed, and my friend, by the way, said, no, I don't want the money. I am taking this guy down, just so you understand, and won the fight. But that is how they attempted to fix the fight in Pride. And there's a fight going on right now. Do you guys remember Teeson or Tenson? He's the kickboxing champion that Floyd went over and cleaned up. Do you guys remember that? He's doing a gimmick in Japan right now where he's going to fight 3 guys in one night. Now, set commissions aside, I realize we could not do that here. I'm okay with them doing that there. I don't have any problem with it, but to let you know how you do that is only one way, which is they're fixed. I'm going to fight 3 guys in one night. Okay, great. You sell out an arena. You put this on television. In the first fight, tension gets knocked out. See the problem? The only way you know he can make it to match number 2 is if you set up match number 1, and the only way you know he can make it to match number 3 is you also set up match number 2. It's the only possible way you can do this. Vince McMahon thought about buying the UFC at one point. He was being urged by his son Shane, who's a huge fan. Vince said, I'm not going to buy it. You want to know why? Because you can't have any stars. And you want to know why you can't have any stars? The only way to have a star is if you know the outcome. And the only way you know the outcome is to control it. And Vince did not think that MMA could get off the ground because of it. And in all fairness, Vince was not totally wrong, at least in theory. It is hard to build a star. I mean, the recipe that Dana White ended up adjusting and going with to build his stars largely did not have to do with outcome, because sports up until that point, including professional teams, you want to know who sells the most merchandise, who makes the most money in merchandise? Whoever in the hell the current champion is. That's who. Not who people care about, or they're diehard, or they love them most, or they've been in that city the longest. Whoever won the last Super Bowl, that's the team every year, never miss, that sells the most hats. Real simple. So Dana did adjust that recipe very much. There was very much a juggle process because those guys couldn't stay on top. And there was many guys where he thought were, and they would go out there and they would get upset. And it changed over time. I'm not going to tell you what he did. You have to observe that on your own. I know well what he did, but I'm not going to tell you what he did. But Vince was not wrong at that time for what the entire world had seen. You cannot have a star unless he wins a bunch of matches. And the only way you know he's going to win is if you control it. And this is the way they did it in Japan. I don't believe that Floyd and or Logan agreed to do anything. I really don't. I don't think that Floyd would go in a back room and do that. I don't think he would. It's not risk getting caught. Going out there and doing a work when you're a second generation fighter, it's not worth it. Oh, and by the way, Logan was working his ass off. He was exhausted, and he was still throwing punches. He threw 100 punches that didn't even land, 100 punches more than Floyd. I mean, I saw two guys, when it was time to fight, that fought. And the rest of the time, I saw two guys that were cooperating in some fashion. So how did that conversation go? Did they ever sit down in a room? Was it ever explicitly stated? I don't think so. I don't. But even in Pride, just to help open your mind to how these things work, even in Pride, they didn't sit him down. It wasn't like a wrestling match. They only went to one guy, and they didn't even ask him to lose. They just asked him to not use his greatest skills. And they had a whole pile full of money in cash if he was willing to do it.